Welcome to Consulting Mastery, where we help B2B consultants master the business of consulting. I'm Karie.
And I'm Ahmad. Join us as we explore the art of delivering outstanding client value, earning a higher income, and thriving in today's marketplace. Client says to me, I'd like to sell this assessment as a service. It would be an assessment of some key business processes. I'm leaving the details aside. It's not relevant. That would lead into some recommendations. My concern is I don't know if the client will implement these recommendations. And in fact, my experience is that they won't. And then the champion of the project internally, when he doesn't get the results or she doesn't get the results that they're looking for, will turn around and blame me. And everyone in the organization will think, well, it was my fault. The consultant came in and didn't get results, because that's an easy scapegoat, right? So I don't know if I should sell this assessment. And let's just say this assessment is material to his business. Like it could significantly impact his revenue. And it might actually be an existential thing, whereas if he doesn't sell this assessment, the business is at risk. And there's this fear of, well, what if they blame me? What if they turn around, don't do it, don't get the results, and then I suffer the reputational risk? What do you say, Karie?
I'm laughing because as someone who, worked for large organizations for a long time, I can count on many hands a number of times that happened, right?
Well, you're the one that blamed the consultant. He's 100%. Talking about you.
100%. But I think what's interesting about it is the scenario where the consultant could be blamed and the scenario where the consultant was not to blame, whether, that was the company line or not. Those two scenarios were handled very differently. And at the base of it, there was a very different perspective and expectation of said consultant when they walked into the room. When it came to, whose problem it was that we were solving and what everybody's role was when it came, to getting from current state to future state. And so I completely understand the fear and also completely able to be mitigated, depending on how you frame and approach and communicate with the people that you're supporting.
My big problem with this line of thinking, and there's a lot that I'm sure we'll get into here, but my big problem with this line of thinking is it is inherently selfish. What you're saying, and I'm not trying to point fingers at this client if you're listening, right? This is not an uncommon idea and concern. But what you're really saying is, I care more about my potentially threatened reputational risk, and it's not a real concern. It's a perceived concern. I care more about my perceived reputational risk than I care about giving you the opportunity to get better results. So I'm not even gonna attempt to help you, just in case you might say bad things about me. And that I think that's fundamentally selfish.
Well, what it is I'm getting into this relationship, right? This engagement for me. I'm getting into this so that someone tells me how great I am or not. And, to be clear, of course, if we're in this kind of business, we want to do well, right? We want to be perceived and seen as the experts that we are. The problem arises when that becomes, the driving force behind what you're doing. And so it's really worth thinking about why you're doing this at all. And for most people, they got into consulting because they saw problems and they knew how to fix them. And they saw other people who didn't know how to fix them flailing. And the satisfaction came from, getting in there and working side by side with other people to get to a solution, to get to a better place. And the forgetting of that is where the danger lies.
Yeah, and you mentioned we want to do well, and you're right. Everybody wants to do well, and there's no conflict here between doing what's right for the client and keeping their client's best interest in mind and doing well. In fact, those objectives are intertwined. Jay Abraham talks about this idea of the strategy of preeminence, and we have the discussion on this in 90-Day Pipeline on the preeminent consultant. Preeminence is this kind of really hard to define word, but what it means to me is, how do you become the obvious choice? How do you become the de facto choice? How do you become the trusted, safe choice? How do you become preeminent in your market? And there's a lot to say about that, and that might even be a separate episode, frankly. But one of the core tenets of this philosophy is you have to fundamentally put the client's best interest ahead of yours. And not just in terms of lip service, but like you have to genuinely, both in your prospecting, pre-engagement conversations and your relationships with prospects and in your client relationships, you have to genuinely want their results first and foremost. And what that does, among other things, is in a sales conversation, when you're more concerned about their results, guess what happens? You end up bringing everything back to their results. You end up having a discussion on the risks to their results. You end up bringing up what they need to do in order to get their results. Like everything centers around what's going to get them results. And what that does when it's genuine, again, lip service doesn't work here. When it's genuine, what that does to the client and the prospect is it makes them trust you. It makes you appear preeminent, that you're less concerned about winning the deal. Here's an example of this. When you actually talk clients through viable alternatives to working with you, and you give them the pros and the cons, and you're honest, in this situation, you might be better off going this way, but in this situation, I might be a better choice. When you have an open, transparent conversation about that, now they trust you because they can see you're actually willing to lose the deal and lose the business in the interest of getting them results. That's your concern.
And I mean, the flip side is you're just creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. The moment you start worrying about what people think about you, then the decisions you make all the way along the path, from, generating demand all the way through to delivering the solution, you're going to make decisions that are not going to be in the best interest of the client and are therefore going to move you farther away instead of closer to what really needs to happen. And that often means an unpopular path. It means telling them something they don't want to hear. It means pointing out something that is uncomfortable. It means, bringing all of your skills to bear to help walk with them in the right direction. And it can feel uncomfortable and, difficult and frightening in the moment. But if your overarching goal is to solve the client's problem versus make yourself look better, you can imagine the kinds of decisions you're going to make and the difference between those two paths and the likely outcome.
Well, the consequences of this unhealthy concern with reputational risk are so many. In the deal making sales conversation, if your concern is reputational risk, you will run away from any engagement that has risk or risk beyond your little tiny comfort zone. And guess what? Those are the most interesting deals. Those are the more expensive deals. The deals with high stakes, when they need you, they need your process, they need your expertise, they need your insight, and there's a lot on the line. Those are more interesting. Those are more expensive. And if you're overly concerned about, well, what if it goes wrong and they blame me? You're going to run away from those deals, and that's going to be terrible for your business, and your business will be boring because you'll only do things that are squarely in your comfort zone. And that's, well, to each his own, but I think that's going to be pretty boring for you. And secondly, to your point, you're not going to tell the client the truth. When they're going down the wrong path and they're doing the wrong things and they're doing it wrong, and they're doing things or not doing things that are going to jeopardize the results. Well, if you want to be Mr. Nice Guy, you don't want people talking bad about you in the boardroom, then you're not going to tell them the truth. And therefore, you're not doing your job as a consultant. And your length of time in that organization will be limited because guess what? Clients don't want consultants who agree with them. Clients want consultants who challenge the status quo and challenge them. And they might not put it that way, but that's what they really value, and that's what they pay for.